Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live at 21stcenturywire.com, the alternate current radio network, as well as Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, Facebook Live, and also streaming out live on X. Again, I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Got a very important broadcast today. We're going to be covering some very important material. There's breaking news overnight. Yesterday, Donald Trump declared war on Yemen, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. We'll go through some of the details of this, and then later we'll also be joined by some of our members of the team here at 21st Century Wire and Alternate Current Radio to discuss this story, plus other big breaking news stories, and that's the theme of the show today. This really is Trump's war on Yemen, as well as Israel's war on Yemen. And this is the difficult thing, ladies and gentlemen, to try to tease apart what is Israel's priorities and policies and what are the United States' priorities and policies. It's really becoming very, very hard to tell the difference. It's hard to decipher who is actually running foreign policy in the United States. This is becoming more and more and more tangled and more difficult. And this weekend is really the perfect example of this conundrum that the United States finds itself in, but also the Trump administration finds itself in. Just a couple of months in to the presidency, and Donald Trump has already started his first new war. So he's an undeclared war of aggression, basically in no certain terms declaring war on Yemen. And the statements made by Marco Rubio, we'll take a look at those shortly, but this is disturbing to say the least. Let's be clear, Yemen did not attack the United States, although the United States has bombed Yemen and killed civilians before this weekend. So the U.S. has already been at war with Yemen, even though Yemen's been very clear about its intentions, about why it's enforcing a naval blockade in the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. They've been very clear about this. They're opposing Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza. And what's interesting about this latest and spat here, we'll bring this up here. Trump orders attack on militant sites in Yemen and issues a warning to Iran. So this is just kind of getting ridiculous at this point. Totally unspecific, completely all over the place. If this passes for foreign policy, ladies and gentlemen, we are in big trouble. And here is the other problem here. Trump, or whoever's operating his Twitter account, it's very hard to tell if it's the thoughts and words of the actual president, or it's just one of his aides or one of the other hotheads who writes these things. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, if we showed you these truths or whatever they are on Truth Social, all caps with exclamation marks, it's like an adolescent is running the Twitter account or the social media account. It's not how statesmen talk. It's not how diplomats talk. Marco Rubio has also adopted this kind of flippant, sort of crazed adolescent style of communicating U.S. foreign policy through social media. It's kind of ridiculous at this point, but it does have serious implications. And one of the problems here is Donald Trump has basically laid out, or the Trump administration's laid out an ultimatum. They said if Iran doesn't engage in negotiations on nuclear talks, that there'll be military consequences. So the U.S. is basically threatening the Iran, saying, if you don't come to the table to discuss nuclear control or whatever, it's based on this accusation that Iran has nuclear weapons, but there's never been any evidence to prove that, or not anything even close. Okay, so this is all. Where is this coming from? It's all coming from Israel. So Israel's told the U.S. to tell the Iranians they don't come to the table to negotiate nuclear weapons reduction of weapons they don't have. Of course, makes it all more ridiculous. But if they don't come to the table, the U.S. is going to attack them militarily. So if you don't negotiate with us, we're going to attack you. Now, I don't know about you, and my little knowledge of negotiations, having a master's degree in international relations, global security, studying game theory, so I have a little bit of knowledge in negotiations. And also as a journalist, having covered all these events over the years, your opening gambit isn't to threaten the other side, that if they don't come to the table, you're going to bomb them, okay? This is how the other side will not come to the table to talk to you, okay? Second thing, and this should be the obvious thing, but of course, I'm talking to the MAGA audience. Those of you who are able to grasp what I'm saying, I applaud you for opening up your brains for some level of functionality. But the rest of you, you're a lost cause if you don't understand this basic concept. It is so patently ridiculous that the Trump administration is demanding Iran come to talk about nuclear weapons, okay? When it was the Trump administration in May 2018 who dispatched its stooge, Mike Pompeo, or should I say Netanyahu's stooge, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, along with the full knowledge and approval of Donald Trump, to kill the Iran nuclear deal that was already in place. Our country, our government, you paid for 5 years of preparation and negotiations to put the JCPOA Iran nuclear deal together. That happened under the Obama administration. One of the most useful things that Obama did, one of the few useful things he did as president. It was already in place, had total control, total international oversight, a completely bulletproof deal that ensured Iran would not be pursuing any nuclear weapons, and that its nuclear material that could be used for weapons was being transported out of the country and dealt with accordingly. Okay, Trump destroyed that. And when he destroyed that in 2018 in his first term, he pushed the region and the world closer to war. Okay, you gave Iran the incentive to pursue nuclear weapons at that point. Because what you said is, no matter what we negotiate, no deal is good enough. Israel can veto any deal. Israel will veto any treaty or any deal that it does not like. Okay, so whatever you come to terms with now, and so it could be short-lived. This is a game, because if you engage in negotiations with Israel, you know what the negotiations are going to be like. They'll make an impossible deal. They'll screw you 10 different ways, and then they'll scream bloody murder if you don't accept the deal. Then they'll blame you for the consequences, which are they're going to bomb you, or they in the U.S. will bomb you, and they'll blame the victim for it, saying, we offered you a perfectly good deal, and oh, they rejected it. I can't believe we were so generous. That's not negotiations. The U.S. is trying the same tactic with Russia. Same exact Israeli tactic, which is front load a ridiculous negotiation, opening gambit, knowing that the other side will never accept it, and then blaming the other side for rejecting it. That's the Israeli formula. They've done it for decades. This is why the region is in the state it's in, because of that. So now Israel is dictating to Washington, to the Trump administration, its envoys, how to conduct negotiations. And they're doing it Israeli style. That's a recipe for world war, quite frankly. This is a disaster. The U.S., Trump, Rubio have fumbled the ball in Gaza. They're fumbling the ball in Ukraine. And they're going to fumble the ball with Yemen and Iran as well. 0 for 3. 0 for 3. That's called you've struck out. You've struck out. It's been 2 months. You're 0 for 3 already. You whiffed 3 times. You fumbled 3 times. Why? Because you are using Israeli tactics and you're not engaged with reality about what's going on. Okay. Second thing, Yemen was not attacking anybody. There were not any attacks, although their leadership issued a warning that if Israel does not lift the blockade on Gaza, that's right, after genociding the Palestinians, Israel turns around 2 weeks ago and says, we're going to shut off food and water. After killing 100,000 Palestinians, and who knows how many others are under the rubble. They're saying, we don't like the way things go. We're going to cut off your food and water now. We've killed 100,000 of you. We've starved. We've maimed. How many people have lost limbs as a result of the evil Israeli pogrom, pulverization of Gaza? I mean, what do you call it at this point? As a result of that, they're going to punish them more. So Yemen, Ansar Allah, who's in control of most of the country, the West call it the Houthis. It's not what they're called, but the idiotic West, the idiotic Western media, the idiotic Western political class calls it the Houthis because it sounds, I don't know, convenient. That's not what they're called. This is not what they are. Okay, the political movement in control is Ansar Allah. They're based in Sana'a. That's the capital of Yemen. Okay, not the Houthis. But anyway, I'll have to use the term so that people out there can follow the narrative a little bit. They said if Israel doesn't lift this vicious blockade trying to starve the Palestinians, the Gaza people in Gaza, starve them out of existence, then they will start attacking Israeli ships, anything heading to Israel, and possibly Israeli targets inside Israel again. Because of that threat, the United States and the UK and Israel, all three countries, launched bombing campaigns this weekend on Yemen. Yemen's one of the poorest countries in the world. Despite being the poorest country in the world, it's the only one who's willing to stand up for the Palestinian cause and to defend people who are getting absolutely slaughtered, massacred by the Israelis with U.S. and German and British weaponry. Okay. So their punishment is so Rubio, the top diplomat in the U.S., rather than go to the Israelis. Now, bear with me. I know this is going to be a stretch, especially in some people's idea of what diplomacy is. But if I was the country's top diplomat, rather than start a new war, which is the thing, Trump, the peace president. Oh, I don't want any wars. I want the killing to stop. How many people did they kill this weekend in Yemen? All poor people under the poverty line. Okay. Rather than start a new war, why don't you send little Marco to Israel or send Steve Witkoff or whoever and say to the bloodthirsty regime, the wanted war criminal, Netanyahu, wanted war criminal, say to the wanted war criminal, wait a minute, we don't want to go to war with Yemen. Why don't you just let food and water into Gaza? And then we'll avoid an unnecessary additional war. In addition to all the other dozen wars that we're currently fighting, we'd like to do one less war. So just let the food and the water in and the medical supplies. Oh, and by the way, Israel, why don't you stop bombing hospitals? Because they just bombed another hospital this week, the Indonesian hospital. They're targeting doctors, medical workers. The Israeli military is targeting medical workers, aid workers, anybody who dares to help the beleaguered Palestinian people currently under an ongoing genocide by the Israelis, backed by the U.S. They're targeting medical workers, aid workers, and they're blocking food, water, and medical supplies from coming into Gaza. Okay, let's just avoid all that. Treat the people like they're human beings and avoid an additional war. That's all. Oh, but we can't let the Yemenis be seen to win. Here we go. This is the real problem, isn't it? The Yemenis can't be seen to be on the right side of the issue, to be the moral party, to be the one who are basically providing the moral north, the thing that our moral compass is set to. That's the Yemeni political position. Their demands are stop the genocide, lift the inhumane, illegal, by international law, illegal blockade. Totally in line with international law. So what does the U.S. do? They label them a terrorist group and they bomb them. That's what they've done. So rather than stop treating Palestinians like animals, like as the defense minister of Israel, Yoav Gallant, called them, quote, human animals. Okay, rather than treat them like human beings, they decided it's easier just to go and start a new war with Yemen. Let's bomb them again. Not the first time. Biden did the same thing. And guess where it got him? Nowhere. And guess where this is going to get the Trump administration? Nowhere. Just problems. What they're trying to do, and this is the end game, if you haven't worked this out yet, what they're trying to do is provoke a reaction by Yemen to hit back at U.S. targets or Israeli targets, and then the U.S. and Israel will go to the global media and Europe, and they'll say, Iran has done this. Iran has done this, and we must prepare to strike Iran. They're dangerous. They mean us harm, etc., etc. So they're using Yemen to create the pretext to go after Iran. This is clear. This is what this is. This is all coming from Israel, pure and simple. Did you notice a couple of weeks ago, around February 12th, 13th, the U.S. released a quote story about a quote leak, an intelligence leak, that Israel's planning to strike Iranian nuclear facilities, and that they're asking the U.S. to help them carry out this operation. Okay, that was coming just as Tulsi Gabbard is sworn in as Director of National Intelligence. Coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. The selection of Tulsi Gabbard, coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. There's something afoot. There's something going on in full daylight here, okay? That leak is coming from Israel. It's to prepare the American public and Washington for what Israel wants, which is a joint operation with the U.S. and Israel attacking Iran, or at least hold that threat over the region, over Iran and the world for now. Okay, that's what this is, and this is what the Yemen situation is. Not only that, it's just there to buttress Israel's absolute corruption and moral degradation. That's all it is, and to deflect, and to create a new enemy in the region. We've seen all this before. This is old hat. This is absolutely old hat. So let's just do a quick appraisal here. Let's just look at what some of the reactions are from some of the other countries. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister here. We'll take a look at what Lavrov is saying. Bring that up on screen. Yes, he's saying to Marco Rubio, this is what the Russian foreign minister is saying, stop bombing Yemen. Okay, in response to the reasoning presented by the American side, Sergei Lavrov emphasized the need for an immediate cessation of the use of force and the importance of all parties engaging in diplomatic dialogue, political dialogue, to find a solution that prevents further bloodshed. That makes sense, doesn't it? No, that doesn't make sense. In Washington, though, they have other ideas. Washington has other ideas. There's Sergei Lavrov clearly making a plea to please don't start another war to the United States. And I can't even begin to describe some of the communiques released. Look at some of the images coming out here from Yemen. There's a comment from Dan Cohen there, who's has also been on our program before. Great journalist. We'll try to get him back on again. But Dan saying, there is no U.S. national security justification for bombing Yemen. This is purely about punishing the resistance to the Zionist genocide in Gaza. Donald Trump betrays the Constitution, which he has sworn to uphold. He demonstrates loyalty to international Zionism, not the American people. And there we go. More dead civilians in Yemen. That's what's happening, ladies and gentlemen. That's all it is. And there's some other good posts, obviously some great coverage from some other journalism professionals on this issue here. But let's bring up, if we can, the tweet by Marco Rubio. We'll try to bring this up on screen if we can. But this is just completely ridiculous. He's reposting Trump's flippant tweets here, and this is what Rubio is basically saying on this. It's pretty incredible. Today, the President of the United States sent a powerful and clear message to the, quote, Iranian-backed Houthi terrorists in Yemen. So it has to be Iranian-backed Houthi terrorist. So three pejoratives strung together that basically gives the impression to America, who's none the wiser, that the, quote, Houthis, it's not their real name, are terrorists. Where have the Houthis carried out terrorist attacks anywhere? In Europe, in the United States, in the Middle East? No, they're not how do they fit into the definition of a, quote, terrorist? They're enforcing a naval blockade in accordance to the international courts of justice and the International Criminal Court and UN General Assembly resolutions condemning Israel. They're the only ones doing it. The poorest, imagine this, the poorest country in the world is the only one enforcing international law. They're sanctioning Israel. Yemen is sanctioning Israel exactly the way the United States and Britain and everybody else sanctions the Iranians, sanctions Syria, sanctions Cuba, sanctions North Korea. In the case of Syria, Iran, and these other countries, especially Syria and Russia, that includes militarily attacking them. That's part of their sanctions. Even blowing up pipelines in Europe. The U.S. reserves the right to blow up people's pipelines as an extension of their sanctions. This is a precedent, folks. So totally lawless. Yemen's not doing that. They've been very specific. Stop killing Palestinians who are under illegal occupation via international law. So this is what Rubio's saying here. So Rubio said, let's look at what Trump is saying. Donald Trump, I have to read this because today I've ordered the United States military to launch decisive and powerful military action against Houthi terrorists in Yemen. There we go, Houthi terrorists. They have waged an unrelenting campaign of piracy, and that's not true. Yemen has not done any piracy, violence, and terrorism against American and other ships, aircraft, and drones. If the U.S. military are loitering off of Yemen territorial waters after having launched airstrikes against them, after Donald Trump, after 9 years of blitzkrieg bombing of Yemen with U.S. jets, weapons, U.S. assistance of Saudi Arabia and the UAE pummeling that country, plus enforcing an illegal blockade on Yemen, starving hundreds of thousands of people. That's the context. But Donald Trump can't seem to put that context in his, quote, truth or tweet because he doesn't care about the context. Marco Rubio doesn't care about the context. They just want to rewrite history starting last week. Okay? It's exactly what these people do. This is what Biden did with Ukraine and Russia. It's what Israel and the U.S. did with October 7th. Ignore everything that happened right up to this point, and let's just scream and shriek with righteous indignation about these, quote, terrorist attacks. Stripping all the context out of it makes people none the wiser. And then the old chestnut here, Joe Biden's response was pathetically weak. Biden is weak. This would have never happened if I was president. Same tropes. So the unrestrained Houthis just kept going. No, the one who's unrestrained is Israel. That's the source of this problem. And you have people in Washington. When I say genocide on social media, all of the people freak out. MAGA supporters, Zionist shills. Patrick, you're losing credibility by using that term genocide. No, I'm gaining credibility because that's what it is. If you're denying that, you're losing credibility. Sorry. So anyway, he goes on. I mean, I don't know what to say about this. It's just ridiculous. But the other one is just on a level of patheticness that is just unmatched. Okay, let's take a look at this one. I'll go to the good point. To all Houthi terrorists, says Donald Trump, your time is up and your attacks must stop, in all caps, starting today. If they don't, hell will rain down upon you like nothing you've ever seen before. Okay? Really? So, Donald Trump, you said to Hamas, If all the hostages aren't released, hell is going to rain down on Gaza. Did hell rain down on Gaza? No. Israel had already rained hell on Gaza for a year and a half. But the U.S., Trump didn't rain hell on Gaza. All the Israeli hostages weren't released. Of course, Donald Trump didn't mention the Palestinian hostages. And here it is again, giving this ultimatum, this blustering, fire-breathing ultimatum. Hell's going to rain down like nothing you've ever seen before. If it's anything like the last threat of hell raining down, I wouldn't be too worried about it if I was Yemen. Just saying. Because they've been under your hell raining down on them for over a decade of the United States and its allies. Okay, over a decade. Started by Obama, and now you are continuing Obama's failed policies. So again, I don't see any material difference here between Donald Trump and Barack Obama. Continuation of the war in Yemen, same as Obama. Weapons to Ukraine, same as Biden. Cash to Zelensky, same as Biden. Intelligence sharing for Zelensky, same as Biden. Weapons to Israel, carry on the genocide, same as Biden. New boss, same as the old boss. There's no material difference. There's only a difference in rhetoric. And again, I just have to remind people that's the poorest country in the world, that the United States is playing tough and flexing like they're doing something. Okay? And this poorest country of the world are standing up for the poorest people in the world in Gaza who are getting genocided. And Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and all the blowhards in Washington, their response to that is to bomb them and threaten them that if they don't stop doing something they're not doing, that they're going to pulverize them and, quote, hell's going to rain down on them. I mean, this is just getting like, this is like Comic-Con at this point. This whole scene is a meme, basically. We have the Secretary of State tweeting out like a teenager, calling U.S. students on campuses staging terrorist riots. That's the terrorist riots. That's the term Marco Rubio used. Terrorist riots. They want to deport and lock up this leader of the student protest, Mahmoud Khalil, who dared to lead human rights protests at Columbia, and they're falsely labeling him as Hamas, which is retarded. Just full retard. For the record, it's full retard. Never, as Simple Jack said in Tropic Thunder, guys, go see that film. It's just ridiculous at this point. And we have our Secretary of State tweeting like a teenager on social media, saying stupid things, threatening people, threatening countries. Marco Rubio, just resign. Just quit at this point. You're going to end up quitting anyway, because you're going to create so many problems for the country, and you're going to be the scapegoat. Okay, that's what's going to happen. You're not going to, at this rate, you will not last through this term. There's no way. I predict you're digging yourself into such a hole. And Donald Trump is the president. I know we're used to it. I don't mind, flippant adolescent tweets to a domestic audience. We're used to that. But don't go around threatening other countries and then putting lies in your communications, provable lies, threatening and bombing other countries at the same time. And then having the temerity to brand yourself as a president of peace. Okay? Israel is the problem. Israel is vetoing cabinet picks for the intelligence agencies, which they did this past week. Israel vetoed a cabinet pick for Tulsi Gabbard's deputy DNI. Okay, the Israeli lobby brigaded and canceled a pick because this person wasn't hawkish enough against Iran and wasn't showing enough loyalty to Israel, apparently, as we're told. And it's the same with the National Security Advisor. His confirmation's being held up for the same reason. So Israel's vetoing our cabinet, our intelligence picks. They're dictating our foreign policy, And they're pushing us to bomb other countries and start World War III with Iran. Israel's doing that. So who's in charge? Is it Donald Trump? Are you in charge? Is Donald Trump president? I love to put this poll on. Gerald Celente had a brilliant poll which he put up on his social media. We'll try to find that in a moment. But Gerald Celente put this poll up. We'll try to bring it up on screen. He said, "Who is the most powerful person in the United States?" And we'll try to bring that. See if we can find that poll that Celente did. Put it up on X here. Let's see if we can bring that up. There it is. The most powerful person in the U.S., says Celente. There he is. There's his poll on X. The most powerful person in the U.S., A, Elon Musk, B, Donald Trump, C, Netanyahu, and D, C, answers. And guess who got the most votes? Overwhelming. It's a blowout. Benjamin Netanyahu is the most powerful person, according to this poll by Gerald Celente. That's what a lot of people believe. Nice sample size, about 7,000 votes. Not bad. So Netanyahu is the most powerful guy in America, folks. So just let that one sink in for a moment. So that's kind of where we're at with this. It's ridiculous. There's another thing that they're doing. Also, I might add that you'll see the language is changing now. They're justifying hitting civilians in Yemen, saying that they're Houthi-controlled buildings, Houthi-controlled hospitals. This is exactly what Israelis did in Gaza, that they said everything was Hamas-controlled. This is a Hamas-controlled building. Hamas is hiding there. There's tunnels under there. The hospital is Hamas-controlled, must bomb it and kill everybody inside. So this is a cheap way of getting away with mass murder. Okay, the Israelis did the same thing in South Lebanon. Oh, that's a Hezbollah house. Oh, there's missiles in the garage. Oh, the village has Hezbollah's hiding in there. We'll have to level the whole village. So this is the same old trick. Okay, this war on terror BS is getting out of control. That governments like Israel and the U.S. are now using it to get away with mass murder and to be totally unaccountable to any kind of law or international norms, just by slapping the so-called, the Houthi label, the Hezbollah label, or the Hamas label on anything they want to pulverize. It is so shallow, so cheap, and so corrupt. Okay, and don't think that the U.S. and Israel are going to get away with this. Okay, they might get away with it in the short term, but they are passing on strife and conflict and misfortune and suffering to our children and their children's children. Okay, because that price is going to get paid eventually. Might not be paid today, this week, or next week, but somebody's going to pay for that. And it's probably not going to be the old men who are doing it today. Okay, they're passing on that debt to the future. This is why we're in the situation we're in now. This is why the Middle East is a completely dysfunctional hellhole. It's because of all these, we are paying today the debts, the Palestinians are paying the debts of the previous old men oligarchs that screwed the region up before. Pure and simple, folks. Pure and simple. So instead of breaking the cycle, we're just initiating new cycles of violence now and not dealing with the core of the problem. And the core of the problem is what Israel is doing to the native Palestinian population. Pure and simple. And until that's addressed, until Israel is restrained, we're going to get more war, more violence, more suffering, and everything else. Okay? Very simple. So this administration, like the last, thinks, oh, we're going to get away with it because we're the most powerful hegemon and nobody can do anything to stop us. And Israel's thinking we have the U.S. behind us. Washington has our back, so we can get away. We can kill as many as we want. In fact, let's occupy a large chunk of Syria now, and let's steal some more territory from Lebanon. And while we're at it, why don't we take? Let's prepare to take some more of Egypt, for instance, or Jordan, or whatever's next. Let's take the West Bank. That's next on Israel's the greater Israel shopping list. Okay. And they think they're going to get away with it, and they may do in the short term. but this will come back. The blowback, whether it's in this generation or the next, will just continue, and it will be immense. It'll probably be a lot more severe than it would be if they had come to some mutual, reasonable solution, which could have happened 30 or 40 years ago, 50 years ago, or in 1948 for that matter. But it didn't, because people were greedy. People were cruel, greedy, and money was driving everything. Money and power. And the suffering of the people who live in the region, it's an afterthought for Western powers. It's literally an afterthought. They literally don't care. So anyway, that's where we're at with Yemen, and we'll try to continue some of this conversation after the break. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. This is the Sunday Wire. We will see you in just a few minutes.